are able to edit it and put it together. And we've been talking about doing this for literally 3 years. And so we finally were able to get everyone's schedules to line up and be able to do it. So it was definitely worth the travel and the aggravation and whatever else, goes into this kind of travel anytime. But I have to be back for tomorrow. We have Shavuot tomorrow night with we do conjunction with the Congregation of Beth Shalom. So never miss that. That's 23 years we've been doing that together. So I just put us up on Facebook. So I had to be there for that too. So so my flight got delayed. I was supposed to be it doesn't matter. I'm leaving now at 12 o'clock. My main concern is that if they don't leave, if the flight doesn't leave, then there's a flight at 5:35 in the morning. So there's still a chance. There's still a chance that I might be staying overnight here, but I would have liked to have been in the hotel. Let me just see if they updated. Nope. It's still 12:03 a.m. Anyways, so it'll be an interesting, might be an interesting evening. I'll be tired, but like I said, it's well worth all of it. Yeah.
Rabbi, not too humid for you out there, huh?
Oh, please don't. I'm not going to say anything. You don't want me to say anything negative, please. I can't stand this.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut off there.
Oh, don't worry about it, Benjamin. Don't worry about it. But anyways, I do not like this humidity, and I will tell you that there's no chance that I'm moving anywhere like this anytime soon because and look, we're spoiled. I mean, we have other obviously issues in California, but we don't have humidity, and that's pretty high on my list of things to avoid. Anyways, with that being said, there is thinking about traveling and thinking about being on the road is a perfect segue to where we are right now in the book of Numbers, which is on the road. And we're getting real close, and time wise and distance wise, we're real close. And as a matter of fact, today we're gonna open with a and I'm gonna show you on the map real quick. We're right about coming into the land of Israel right here. As a matter of fact, this site, today we begin actually right here in this area of Arad, which is, you're thinking like, oh wait, that is Israel, and it is. Today, if you go to Arad, it's actually one of the kind of southern parts of, well, it's just below the West Bank. It's in Israel proper. If Israel ever had to give back a West Bank or Palestinian country was created in this area, you'd have to go, if you went from Jerusalem up here to, for example, Masada, you'd have to go down through Arad, which is the way people did until 67. If they went from here or anywhere here, instead of going along the Jordan River, which is the river, the 90 highway, which we go on all the time, they had to go around here to come back to here. So they make a loop around the West Bank in order to get into Masada. So Arad is over here. This is where we're going to start the journey. And Israel actually has its first little war, if you will, with the Canaanites. And so this is an interesting text because they don't enter yet, but they're real close. And it's interesting because, well, let's take a look. I'll show you the actual text. So we start here in Numbers chapter 21. The last thing we read about was the death of Aaron, and we spent a little time talking about Shloshim period, about the way we mourn.
Maybe mine's not connecting.
No, you're on, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So that was the last thing we read, and then today we're picking up in chapter 21, and it says right here that when the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the Negev, learned that Israel was coming by the way of Atarim, he engaged Israel in battle and took some of them captive. So it's not a war that like we engaged in. They attacked us, and we weren't supposed to start battling the Canaanites yet. It's kind of like an early battle, and it says, then Israel made a vow to Adonai and said, if you deliver this people into our hand, we will proscribe their towns. And Adonai heeded Israel's plea and delivered up the Canaanites, and they and their cities were proscribed. So they named that place Hormah. So, and then you can look. It says Hormah is connected with Harim a cherem, which is a ban or it's when you make something not usable anymore. So it's basically, and again, they translate it as proscribed, but that's a kind of a fancy word for they made it off limits, and they basically created it as something that could not be used. It's cherem, it's not usable. So it's also the word we use, by the way, for excommunicating somebody and putting them in a kind of a situation of not being connected. As you put them under cherem, you put them under cherem. So the name of the town is called Hormah because it's at this place where Israel kind of fights a war and says, we're not going to do anything with the stuff we take. And so that's a place name that becomes Hormah. And then it says they set out from Mount Hor by the way of the Sea of Reeds to skirt the land of Edom. But the people grew restive on the journey, and the people spoke out against God and Moses and said, why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread and there's no water, and we have come to load this miserable food. We've heard that before. That's something that we've heard.
Yes.
And we've got to, we've become pretty used to this kind of complaining that the people were upset about not having bread, not having water, the fact that they don't even like eating the manna. And so what does God do to punish them? Adonai sent seraph serpents against the people. They bit the people and many of the Israelites died. Now, if you look at the note, it says they don't even translate the word here, seraph. They just say fiery. I don't know. What does Glory's translation have for seraph? You have something there?
Yeah, we're having, yes, she can reply right now. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties.
All right.
Trying to get it up on the big screen. We're at numbers
6, verse
21:6.
21:6.
Numbers 21:6.
Yeah.
Hold on, she's doing it right now.
21:6. Then the Lord sent venomous snakes among them. They bit the people, and many Israelites died.
Yeah. So they don't even translate it. They don't even translate the seraph other than venomous. So the word seraph is the origin of this word. The root of this word is fire.
Okay,
So we have the word seraphim, which actually refers, and if you look at the note from Isaiah, the seraphim are angels that are on fire. They're fire angels. Well, these are not fire angels. These are definitely snakes. The word nachashim definitely says snakes. But the word seraphim also has as its root fire. So are they fiery serpents? That's what it says in the note. Yeah, got the feedback again. So do we this Bible translation didn't even want to translate it because it knew that it was going to be questionable, and so they just didn't even bother. Did the venom make people feel like they were on fire? Maybe, but these don't seem to be normal snakes, and they're definitely ones that God sent. And so this is a punishment. It's not good. They're not angelic snakes, but there's something about them that was definitely divine. They're a divine agent. And it says they bit the people and many of them died. So it's serious. This is not, just they got venom in them or they could get treated. People were dying. And it says the people came to Moses and said, we sinned by speaking against Adonai and against you. Intercede with Adonai to take away the serpents from us. And Moses interceded for the people. So they come to Moses and say, hey, fix this. And of course, Moses does that. And Adonai said to Moses, make a seraph figure and mount it on a standard. And anyone who's bitten and looks at it will recover. So Moses goes to God and says, what do we do? And it says that Adonai said back to Moses, this is what you got to do. You've got to make a statue or a figure, and then people will look at it and they will be healed. Now, it is clear they're not supposed to pray to it. They're only supposed to look at it. But it does seem problematic because, first of all, what was this figure? Because it doesn't say at this point that it is a snake. It says a seraph. And so if you look at the note, it says look above, but they're not translating it here. And it has healing power by looking at it, but it definitely seems to be a problem because it seems like an idol. It seems like it's not something you normally think that Moses would tell people to do. And it says when he actually does it, it says Moses made a copper serpent and mounted it on a standard. And when bitten by a serpent, anyone who looked at the copper serpent would recover. So here it says, make a seraph figure. And here it says he made a bronze figure of a snake. Now, what's interesting about this is that the Hebrew for snake, for serpent, nachash, is also the same as the word for copper. So nachash and nachoshet are, you can see they're the same word. Even if you don't read Hebrew, you can see the nun, the chet, and the shin, and this ends with a top. So the bronze serpent, copper serpent, was like a play on words. And again, it was put on some kind of a pole. And then when people would look at it, they would be healed. That they were healed simply by looking at it. That's the end of that text here. But if you look at the commentary, which we shall, well, the Rashi commentary actually is not super helpful. Here's the Ramban. So Ramban, Nachmanides. So it says he was not told to make it of brass, but Moses said, "The Holy One, blessed be He, called it nachash. Therefore, I'll make it out of nachoshet, brass or copper." Since the one resembles the other in sound, this is Rashi's. So that's what Rashi said before. He continues on in saying, this is the important part, because this is the part that explains a little bit more of what it is. He says, I do not understand this, for the Holy One, blessed be He, did not mention to Moses the word nachash, but said to him, make a seraph, make a fiery serpent. But the intention of the sages is that Moses was guided by the substantive name, so he made it because of the name. And it appears that the secret of this matter is that this is one of the ways of the Torah. Every deed of which is a miracle is within a miracle. Thus the Torah removes injury by means of the cause of the injury and heals illness by means of the cause of the sickness, as the rabbis have mentioned in connection with this verse. What happens is that God provides a cure for the things that people get sick from. And so essentially, let me just see if this is a huge long commentary, but one of the point of this is the general intention of this section is that God commanded that they should be healed by the harmful agent whose nature it is to kill. Therefore, they made its likeness and form and name. And when a person concentrated his gaze upon the brass serpent, which resembled totally the offending agent, he lived. This was to make them realize that it is God alone who sendeth death and maketh alive. And so what they were saying is that when the cure looked exactly like the disease, you recognize that it was God, or the agent of the disease, that it was God alone that was doing it. So it's a problem, because we read later on that this bronze serpent was still being used during the time of the kings. And one of the things that's destroyed during again, during this time of the kings, when people were worshiping idols, was this very idol, which the Bible says was still being worshipped hundreds of years later. And so what seems to have happened is that people kind of, by having this bronze serpent, it led them to other forms of idolatry. And so here's, I'll just show you a quick picture. Nehushtan. This is at least some artistic renderings of what it would have looked like. The Nehushtan. Let me just show you. Is so this is one, this was one of the depictions of it. Look, Let me just show you. You can see the Book of Mormon talks about it. The New Testament talks about references to this area. But if you look right here, it tells us in Kings, in the Book of Kings, King Hezekiah tore down the altars and cut down the Asherah, and he destroyed the Nehushtan. And so you can see that it became somewhat problematic in that this thing that was made that we just read about later on is destroyed by King Hezekiah as he's trying to bring the people away from these other kinds of things, like the Asherot, these poles, these holy poles, holy trees.
You know what's
or
weird,
altars.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
That the principle of homeopathic medicine is based upon that the same thing that it can be a poison is what heals the
Heals you.
illness. Belladonna is a poison, and yet it heals certain illnesses.
Yep. And people recognize that. And you can see, I just popped up the caduceus and the rod of Asclepius. But these
Yes.
symbols have been used for healing, which is also kind of strange because, again, we think that maybe there's a connection that the Greeks used, because Asclepius was their demigod of healing. He was the one who was taught by the gods how to heal, and that he had a staff with a snake on it. The caduceus is actually a double snake, which we're not really sure whether Moses's Nehushtan was one snake or two, but this symbol is still a symbol for this is the symbol for the military's medical corps. It has the caduceus on it. And this symbol, of course, is, this symbol right here is still used, is actually incorporated into, I'll show you right now, actually, some of the, this is the, I'll show you this. This is the flag of the U.S. Army Medical Corps, right?
Yes.
And there's also something that you might have seen before. This is slightly different, but this is a flag that you may have seen. This is the flag of the World Health Organization, which has not the caduceus, but the staff of Asclepius. So there is a difference. One snake is on the Asclepius, and the caduceus has got double. But you can see that these symbols are still used for medicine to this day. And they probably, again, the first references we have of it are really in the Bible, and they're in this.
Yes.
They're in this chapter, this copper serpent. So again, the Bible points out, that Moses kind of maybe improvised it a little bit, or maybe caused a problem, maybe by making it copper, it stayed around longer than it was supposed to. That's kind of the implication, that maybe if he made it out of wood, or if he did something else, that maybe it wouldn't have still been used and wouldn't have led to other idolatry. But there's definitely this feeling like this is a little weird, and this is not what, we're not supposed to use idols. So, how could we, is this, and so, the rabbis pointed out that God was very specific, that you don't worship it, you look at it, and simply by looking at it, you were healed. But again, it's a slippery slope, and people were kind of like, this seems a little too close to idolatry. And so this is one of the reasons why, people have kind of looked at this and said, oh, this is an interesting story, very short story, but an interesting story in the book of Numbers. And again, as I said, it does have modern relevancy because that symbol is still being used a long time later. And so this is this very quick story, but it obviously was an important story because, again, hundreds of years later, King Hezekiah lives literally 500 years after Moses. Did the people have this for 500 years? At least the Bible seems to say that it was. And interestingly, like the Nehushtan lasts for like as long as the ark lasts for, so it's a very important and long lasting symbol. So now it says, and this is where we kind of are maybe crossing over from the Israel side of the Jordan, so the west side, into the east side. Because here it says, the Israelites marched on and camped at Avot. And they set out from Avot and encamped at Ye Abarim in the wilderness bordering on Moab to the east. So Moab is definitely on the Jordanian side, on the in modern day Jordan. And it says from there they set out and encamped at Wadi Zered. And from there they set out and encamped beyond the Arnon, that is, in the wilderness that extends from the territory of the Amorites. For the Arnon is the boundary between Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. So again, just to kind of give you a geographical understanding of where we are, let me just close down these ones and give you the map of where we are. This is where we are. So we're in this area right about here. So this area, Moab, it starts down here. Here's Edom, which is partly in Israel and the Israel side, and then partly on the Jordanian side on the Jordan Valley. So the Jordan ends here at the Dead Sea, but below that, we call it the Jordan Valley, even though it's kind of the river ends there. It goes all the way down here to, and some people call it the Jordan Rift Valley because of the fact that there's the tectonic plates here. But so we've crossed over into this area in the southern part of Moab, and gone to the northern part into this area right here. So this is this is probably again where we are in this area right here. So Moabites, the Ammonites are here later on, and here it says the Amorites are here. And the interesting thing is the Amorites are Canaanite people. They're not Moab and Ammonites and Edomites, because if you remember, Edom is a descendant of Esau. He's Isaac's. He's our cousin because he's Jacob's. Jacob's brother. Moab and Ammon are both descendants of Abraham's family. They're Lot's sons / grandsons. They're the children he had with his daughter, so they're both his sons and his grandsons. They're here, and they're also Abrahamic peoples. But it says that the Amorites are in this area at this time, which means that the Canaanites had crossed over and had settled into this area. This is a critical story because it's actually going to come back, and it's going to pop back into our history in the story of Jephthah during the time of Judges. And it's also going to be part of like Israel's claim for having this territory on the eastern side of the Jordan Valley. How does Israel wind up over here? Because we defeat, well, I'm jumping the gun, but we're about to go to war with the Amorites. And when we do, we take the territory, and the argument, the Ammonites come to us and say, hey, it's our territory. It's where our ancestors live. And we pretty much say, well, we didn't take it from you. We took it from the Amorites. So it's not yours. We didn't take it from you. We took it from them. So you weren't in control of it then. Don't come and complain to us now and say that it's yours. And to some extent, it is similar to the claim that we'd have to some extent with the Palestinians today, because Israel didn't take land from the Palestinians. It was not controlled by there was no Palestinian country in 1947 or 48. So you could make the argument it was taken from the Turks, it was taken from the British, who took it from the Turks, it was taken from the Jordanians, who didn't turn it over to the Palestinians, but Israel never took land from a country called Palestine. So if there was a claim to the land back to the Palestinian people, then what is it based on? Is it based on the fact that the Arabs who lived there were called Palestinian? But they didn't control the land. It was controlled by the Turks and then by the British. So there's a similar dynamic that's going on today when it comes to, well, not the Jordanian side, but the side of Israel itself today. So the next line, and again, there's an interesting something here. Therefore, the book of the wars of Adonai speaks of Wacheb in Sufa and the Wadis, the Arnon with its tributary Wadis, stretched along the settled country of Ar, hugging the territory of Moab. Now, this is a reference to something that we just don't have anymore. And it also seems to be missing something. So if you look at the note here, quotation that follows is a fragment. Its text and meaning are uncertain. And so what's going on here is, first of all, they're telling us there's another book that has a better or has a more complete description of these wars, which we just heard. We've not heard of this book yet. This is the first time we've heard of it in in our reading, but here in Numbers chapter 21, we hear of another book, and it's a book we don't have, and it's specifically the book of the Wars of Adonai, which again is from the context, is a description of the conquest of the land of Canaan during this time. And it seems as though the author, the editors, the people who wrote this part are quoting it. They took out a piece, so they have a book in front of them, they have a scroll in front of them, and they copied this down. And so it's telling us that, again, there was a longer detailed version of this, which they're quoting. Okay. And then it says, and from there to Be'er, which is where the well Adonai said to Moses, assemble the people that I may give them water. If you look at the note here, it just says the word Be'er or beer. It's a beer, but it's Be'er, Be'era. It literally just means well. And then it says, then Israel sang this song, spring up, O well, sing to it. The well which the chieftains dug, which the nobles of the people started, with maces and with their own staffs, and from Midbar to Matana, and from Matana to Nachael, and from Nachael to Bamot, and from Bamot to the valley that is in the country of Moab, at the peak of Pisgah, overlooking the wasteland. So, again, this is telling us that there was a tradition, a song of the journeys of the people that took them onto this eastern side of the Jordan River, which is where they're going to cross over from. So we're very close to, like, at least here, where the crossover point is. I'll show you real quick one more time. So at least here, when we talk about where we are right now, it's right about here. So it's right about here, right about where we're crossing over from the Jordan. So, it's clear that there's other sources that have more complete descriptions of these wars. The editor is basically telling you, I'm giving you a footnote version of this, a Cliff Notes version, of this. And so that's it. I mean, wish we had more to tell you, but at least in this case, somebody quoted it. That means there's another version of this that we don't have, or a more complete version of this that we don't have. But there also is another version of it. I kind of jumped the gun because in about 7 or 8 chapters, we're going to read that other version of the journey, which doesn't quite line up with this. And people have talked about it before. There's maps that show the version here in chapter 21 and the version that we have in chapter 29. So you'll see that there's different versions of that journey. But almost, again, the most important part is that even if there's differences in the description of the journey, all the journeys basically all have us coming in from the east, crossing the Jordan and moving westward across, which was not the most direct way to go, obviously. So now here's another story of what happens when we cross over. And again, it seems like it's a little bit out of order. You'll see why, because it should have come right after where we crossed into the Amorite territory. But here you go. Israel now sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, let me pass through your country. We will not turn off into the fields or vineyards. We will not drink from waters or wells. We will follow the king's highway until we've crossed your territory. Same thing we said to the Edomites too. Remember, and they're our cousins. Amorites are Canaanites. They're not our cousins, and they're not related to us that way. They're Canaanites. They're descendants of Ham. They're descendants of Noah. I mean, that's where we have to go all the way back to Noah to be connected to them. But Sihon would not let Israel pass through his territory. Sihon gathered all his troops and went out against Israel in the wilderness. He came to Yahaz and engaged Israel in battle. And so here it says flat out, they went to war against us. But Israel put them to sword and took possession of their land from the Arnon to the Yabok, as far as Oz of the Ammonites, for Oz marked the boundary of the Ammonites. So it says right here that the area that we took from the Arnon to the Yabok, as far as Oz of the Ammonites, was area that was at one point or some point is Ammonite territory. so it says that the Bible tells us it's Ammonite territory, but it says we took it from the Amorites. I know they sound similar, but they're very different. One of them, the Ammonites, are our closer relatives and are to some extent, family of Abraham people, right? The Sihon and the Amorites are not. And they are Canaanites who we've already been told we're taking their land. We've never been told we're taking Ammonite and Moabite and Edomite land. There seems to be this implication like you're not supposed to go to war against those people. Ideally, you don't. But these people, number one, attack us, and these are people we're supposed to go to war with anyways. And it says Israel took all those towns, and Israel settled in all those towns of the Amorites, and Heshbon and all its dependencies. Now Heshbon was the city of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who had fought against a former king of Moab and taken all his land from him as far as the Arnon. So that's Moabite territory that was taken. So it wasn't just Ammonite territory, also Moabite area. And it says that. It says that the Amorites took it away from them. And however we want to say it, we didn't take it from Moab and Ammon. These were territories that were taken by Canaanites previously. And it says, therefore the bards would recite, come to Heshbon, firmly built and well-founded this Sihon city. For fire went forth from Heshbon, flame from Sihon city, consuming Ar of Moab, the lands of Bamot, by the Arnon. Woe to you, O Moab! You are undone, O people of Chemosh. His sons are rendered fugitive and his daughters captive by an Amorite king, Sihon. And so again, it says that like people knew this song. When it says the bards sang, that's the translation here for the word mishalim, which are some kind of people who sang songs or told stories or poets. Mashal is also the word or the root word for parables, but it's some kind, bards are a good translation. It's people would tell the story or sing a song about what happened when the Moabites lost Heshbon, which was one of their main cities. And so we know later on that the Moabites are living in that town. It's one of their capitals. It's one of their big cities for those people. And it says right here, "O people of Chemosh," that's their God, right? So we're the people of Adonai. We're the Lord's people. We're Adonai's people. They're Chemosh's people. And so the song is, you Moabites and you people of Chemosh, you are, you're losers. And you lost your city. You lost your city to the Canaanites. And so it says right here, does the song end here, or is this a new part that we add to the song, which is, yet we have cast them down utterly, Heshbon along with Dibon. We have wrought desolation on Nophah, which is hard by Medab. So it seems like it's, again, another part of a song, or we added to the song, that now we've taken away from them. And it says, so Israel occupied the land of the Amorites. It does not say the Moabites and the Ammonites. It says we took the land from the Amorites. And again, as I said, later on, the Moabites and the Ammonites, specifically the Ammonites, go to war against us and say, that area that you took on the other side of the Jordan from Sihon and Og, that's our territory. That you never should have had that territory. And we essentially tell them, hey, you know the story. We took it from the Canaanites. We didn't take it from you. So don't come at us. And that was with Jephthah. That was the story of Jephthah that we read in the book of Judges, where Jephthah goes to war against the Ammonites. He defeats them. And he basically teaches them a lesson. But of course, his story is not a happy story, because he promised to sacrifice the first thing that came to him when he came home from battle. And of course, it's his daughter. And that is not a good story of at least what happens to Jephthah by making up that very, very bad promise. So that's where this story comes back. It comes back to us in that form, in the story of Jephthah, which is, again, much later on in the story of Judges. It's 200 years later, but anyways, it's I pointed out to you because, again, this is all in the story, if you will. So it's all, well, you make the argument that also gives Israel, though some people, don't want to hear that and don't want to say it, but it actually gives Israel a claim to part of Jordan. a good part of Jordan, a huge part of Jordan would be under Israel's control based on the fact we took it from the Amorites. That's why, again, at least according to the book of Numbers, a huge chunk of modern day Jordan would be under biblical control, our biblical control based on this. I don't know what to say other than this is, I know a lot of Israelis are claiming we should go in and take this whole area, Heshbon and all the way up to the Golan Heights, because then we'd have the Golan and everything below all the way to the pretty much almost to the Dead Sea would be under Israel's control, not Israelite, modern day Israel's control. All right. So we occupy that area, that part. It's not the end, by the way. That's just one of our battles on the other side. Then Moses sent out to spy Yazer, and they captured its dependencies and dispossessed the Amorites who were there. They marched on and went up the road to Bashan, and King Og of Bashan with all his troops came out to Edrei and engaged them in battle. But Adonai said to Moses, "Do not fear him, for I give him and all his troops and his land into your hand. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon." So, lest you think this is just a story of us going to war, it also is a story of God saying, this is your land. And so again, this area here from Bashan is all the way here. Now it's going to be here all the way to this area. So again, this is all modern day Jordan today. But basically, this whole area from Golan all the way down to here would be under Israelite control, Jewish control. And it was during the time of the tribes. I will show you. Well, we haven't finished the story. Let's finish the story. We'll read a little bit more of the battle because we just were introduced to it. But I will show you what this actually means for us when we as we get to this. So hold it one sec. Let's go back to the text. Okay. And by the way, please, if we get to this end and you still are confused, they defeated. Oh yeah, here we go. It's the one more verse. They defeated him and his sons and all his troops until no remnant was left, and they took possession of his country. So Sihon and Og both get captured, and it says the Israelites then marched on and encamped at the steppes of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. Now, that's the beginning of chapter 22. In our reading, that's the end of the Parsha. That would be with that line. Here, it's part of here in the Christian editors decided to put that as part of chapter 22. It actually makes more sense to end it with there. So that chapter really makes more sense ending with that verse and then beginning with this next chapter, this next idea, which we're about to read. And we're going to read the beginning of Parshat Balak in a very famous part of the Torah. But again, this takes us right to the steps of right to the border and about where we're going to cross over. So I'm going to show you another map, which is the map that kind of jumps ahead to once we capture the land of Canaan and make it the tribal portions. I want to show you this because here's the map of what happened when we cross over and take the land. We wind up with, and we're going to come back. There'll be another discussion about these tribes of the area that they take here, because they take those areas that they took from the Amorites, from the areas that were Moab and the areas that are Ammon. But you can see here that of the tribes that end up inhabiting here, Manasseh, half the tribe of Manasseh takes part of that area. They take the Golan, which is still, which has been part of Israel since 1967. The Golan actually would only be about up to here. It's not. This goes a little further into Syria, but here down below you see Manasseh goes all the way into that area, into that area of Jordan, and then this tribe of Gad is also the area of Jordan, and this is the area of Ammon. This is Ammon up here, and this is Ammon here. So this is all Ammonite. And then down below here, this is where you start to get into the Moabite territory. So everything down here, which is Reuben's territorial claim, that's the Moabites. So Moabites and Ammonites, and then these are Syrians up here, I guess later on. But you know, this area of Golan, which was almost not always, but for a long time was part of ancient Israel. During King David's time, this whole area was part of the nation of Israel, was part of the 12 tribes. It was part of the tribal area was the Golan. So this is, you know, this is area that during at least part of Israel's history was part of Israel, and not greater Israel, part of the Israel that was run by King David and by his children. So again, Israel eventually loses this territory to the Ammonites and the Moabites. They eventually like cross back over and are able during our times of weakness to take this territory. But here, the Edomites down here, you know, are they're kind of the border here with Judah, but Moab and at least the Ammonites also are they're in the picture. You know, they're here, but our tribes are also here. So you can imagine that these tribes were you know, kind of a little different. And we'll get to that, I promise. There's a whole other chapter devoted to these tribes that decided to live on the other side of the Jordan River, what they were risking, what they gave up in order to live over there, right? We will get to that. But right now, this is just how they wound up with it, or how we wound up. It hasn't been divided up yet. You haven't missed anything. But I wanted to show you on a map that this is what happens. This area of Moab and Ammon are under Israelite control. Okay, and it's under Israelite control before we even conquer the rest of the stuff. Before we even get into the land of Israel, we control that. Everybody got that? I hope you see that, because pretty important that this is, you know, this is a pretty important thing, right? So now we're going to get into a whole different idea, a whole different story. And so these next few chapters are the story of Balaam and Balak. And I say Balaam because he's the more famous of the two, and their names sound, they look very similar in English, Balaam and Balak. But Balaam is the more famous of the two. And so we know him as the story, but interestingly, the portion is known by Balak, the king who actually hires him. So we're going to get into this story. But any questions about the conquests of Sihon and Og, these kings that we take land from? We will come back to it, I promise. It's not the end of the story. It's just the explanation. And again, there wasn't a lot of details about the battle, but the important thing is we wound up with that territory. All right. So let's take a look at this part of the story, which is very famous and is arguably the most famous part of the book of Numbers as far as the story goes. This and the spies are probably the two most famous stories. So we're going to jump into it and take a look at Parshat Balak, which again this year is going to be read in about a month, a little over about a month from now. We'll be reading this. Well, 5 weeks. So it says, Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was alarmed because the people were so numerous, and Moab dreaded the Israelites. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick clean all that is about us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, in Petor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, there is a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Okay, so before we read anything more, let's just explain what happens here. So first of all, it says that Balak is scared of what's happened. He's talking, by the way, to the Midianites, who seem to be living amongst him, and that does come back up in the story too, but doesn't seem as important now. The Midianites, remember, are some of them at least are Moses' own family, but it seems like the Midianites are kind of like, you know, they're nomadic people, and they're different tribes. And so some Midianites are good, and some Midianites are probably not good, and some of them are friends, and some of them aren't. But at least in this case, the Midianites are not are living or are a part of the Moabite coalition, if you will. And so Balak, it says Balak sends for, and by the way, it says who his father was. He sends for Balaam. And it says that Balaam lived in Petor, which is by the Euphrates. And if you look at the note, it says by the river. It doesn't say Euphrates, but it says the Nahar. And that the Nahar is the river. When they call it the river, they're talking about the Euphrates. Now, what's interesting here is that it says in the land of his kinsfolk. So where's Balak from? And so there seems to be this idea that Balak himself is not maybe a native Moabite, that he's like a king from a different part of the world, not that far away, but he's of a different ethnicity, he's a different stock. He would be Semitic, he'd be from that area, but he's not actually a Moabite himself. Now, people have speculated that he is a person from another background that was invited to be king. It's possible. We have versions of that in history. We have William and Mary that were of Orange in the Netherlands that were invited to come and be king and queen of England. So it's not unheard of that they were part of a royal family. But the point is that he doesn't seem to be maybe even Moabite himself. What it also is interesting to note, is that Balaam is, and it says who Balaam's father is, Balaam son of Beor, is that he's not living in that area, and he describes the Israelites to him as a people who come out of Egypt, who are numerous. And here's what he says: "Come then, put a curse on them, put a curse upon this people for me, right? Since they are too numerous for me, perhaps I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whomever you bless is blessed indeed, and whomever you curse is cursed." So it sets up right away that Balaam is a professional prophet or sorcerer or diviner or somebody who's very powerful. And he's essentially being hired as a hired gun, as a mercenary, to curse Israel. Now, it says right away, by the way, that he also blesses people, and that whatever he says happens, whatever he says sticks. So he's a very powerful person. That goes without question. And by the way, that seems to go without question in the whole story, is that Balaam is powerful. Now, I will tell you something that a lot of people don't know, and almost nobody knows this. And let's first of all say one thing. The Bible doesn't ever, and even the Talmud, never denies that magic could be effective. They also tell people, don't do it. And what's interesting about this guy, Balaam, again, a lot of people don't know, almost nobody knows, is something very, very important. And I wish more people would know it, but you're going to know it, and you'll share it with people. And I have shared this with people in the past. So if you've read this portion with me in the past, you'll know that I've shared this in the past. There's something really important about Balaam. In 1967, which, by the way, was kind of a watershed year, by the way, folks, right? Not that that's necessarily part of this story, but archaeologists in Jordan, modern day Jordan, it's called Deir Allah, they found an inscription with a story relating the visions of the seer of the gods Balaam, son of Beor, who may be the same Balaam mentioned in Numbers chapter 22, 24. Maybe. Let me put it this way. The odds that it's the same, pretty strong, given the fact that you get his first name and his last name. Now, I'll show you that what it looks like. The Deir Allah inscription looks like this. It looks like biblical Hebrew, not modern Hebrew, but biblical Hebrew. And here's the translation of what we found. Okay? And again, the parts that are in brackets are parts that we don't have, but we can kind of put together based on the letters we do have in the context. And it says, this is the description of Balaam, son of Beor. He was a divine seer, and the gods came to him at night and they spoke to him, right? According to the vision of El, they said to Balaam, son of Beor, this will blank do in the future. No man has seen what you have heard. And Balaam rose on the morrow, and it continues on. And we don't really understand much of what the prophecy is talking about, right? Doesn't seem to really make sense. And again, you can look it up, you can look it up and see, what's in there. It's a lot of it's missing, but it's from what we know from the ancient Near East and from other things we found in Canaanite, it's pretty consistent, right? But here's the important part, the really important part, and why I tell you this. So not only is it this guy, it also uses the word Elohim or El or Elohim, which is a similar word to what we have, is that when we carbon dated this thing, let me show you right here. The inscription has been dated to 880 to 770 BCE. It was painted on ink fragments on a plastered wall. Red and black inks were used, red apparently to emphasize certain parts. There's 119 pieces of ink inscribed plaster that were recovered. It was painted on a wall. And what happened is there was an earthquake, and the excavation, I'm trying to make it big enough for you to see, but the excavation revealed a multiple chamber structure that had been destroyed by earthquake during the Persian period. So that's about 400 years after it had been written, 400 years after it had been written. There was an earthquake, and the building that it was on collapsed, and the walls collapsed, and it collapsed in on itself. And so the area was not resettled, and it was recovered in 1967, 2,000 years, 2,500 years later, after the earthquake, it was recovered, and it was recovered in an area that, again, that was not disturbed. And so when they carbon dated it, it turned out to be 2,800, 2,900 roughly years old. Understand what that means. This is the oldest person mentioned outside of the Bible in another place that we can almost 100% guarantee is the same person mentioned in the Bible. By name. That's pretty important. So whatever we think about Balaam, whenever the Bible and the Midrash and all the sources tell about Balaam, he ended up becoming super important because he actually is the earliest person that we have a reference to that we can actually from the Bible say he's mentioned somewhere else. We don't have a reference to Abraham that's that old. I don't have a reference to Moses that's that old. We have no text or place that we can say, here's his name in a book or a book, but a scroll or a wall or a carving or a tablet. This is the earliest person, individual, not Jacob, not Isaac, nobody, except for this dude. So it's very interesting, and you can understand how important he was that he was mentioned in this text that we found. Now, if we found that text, there's probably a lot of texts that were destroyed over the years that also reference him. So he was clearly an important person. But again, for us, he at least at this point, could change. We could find a document that's 3,000 years old that references Moses or Abraham or David or somebody else. But as of right now, the oldest text that we have that mentions someone in the Bible is this guy. Good trivia question. But that's 100%, that's undeniable. That's undeniable. I don't know why, again, anyone would say it's maybe that person, because again, it's the same name and the guy is doing the same thing, which is being a prophet, a seer, being a man of who speaks for the gods. It's pretty clear. So yeah, we don't know 100% for sure, but as sure as we can be that that's the same guy. So that's an interesting little piece about Balaam that a lot of people don't know, and everybody really should know. If they know anything about the Bible, if anybody asks them who's the oldest person that we have archaeological evidence for existing in an extra biblical text, it's that big. All right. But here's what it happens. It says the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian versed in divination, set out. And again, you know, the idea is that they somehow had divination as they were diviners. They were people who maybe used magic or whatever. They came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. And he said to them, spend the night here, and I shall reply to you as Adonai may instruct me. So the Moabite dignitaries stayed with Balaam. What's interesting about that again is that it says what Adonai says, what the Lord says. It's not El, it's not, you know, another, it is the God that we refer to. So he's going to talk to that God. It says so. Except in the next line, it says, God came to Balaam and said, what do these men want of you? And here it uses the word Elohim. So, again, both names are used here. For people who look at biblical authorship, that's critical because some people say, is this an author that uses Adonai or is this one that uses Elohim? Well, clearly, this author is using both together. And I guarantee you, 100%, that we'll see, probably one of the commentaries will be here. No, this one is not talking about, let's see if any of the commentaries, nope, it does not. It's not discuss it in the commentaries. I was hoping at least one of the commentaries would be right here. No, was the fact that he says he's going to talk to Adonai, but instead Elohim, it's the other name for God that's used here. But again, the commentators were more fixated on this issue, which is why does God ask, what do these men want of you, right? Doesn't God know what the people came for, right? So it's a rhetorical question. It's God basically kind of see what Balaam is going to do. Balaam said to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. Here is a people that came out of Egypt and hides the earth from view. Come now and curse them for me. Perhaps I can engage them in battle and drive them off. And that's what he tells God what he said. But God said to Balaam, do not go with them. You must not curse that people, for they are blessed. So God tells Balaam right off the bat, no, don't do it. You can't do it. Don't go with them and don't do it because they are already blessed by me, right? So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's dignitaries, go back to your own country. And here he says, he goes back to Adonai, right? For Adonai will not let me go with you. So he says to him, Adonai will not let me go with you. The Moabite dignitaries left. And when they came back to Balak, they said, Balaam refused to come with us. Okay. Now, that's not exactly what happened. I mean, that's the net result. But what really happened, what they could have said is the Moabites could have come back and said, God won't let him go. But instead, they say, Balaam refused to come with us. Again, is it splitting hairs? Maybe, but it's not exactly what happened. They don't come back and tell him, you can't go back because God won't let him go back, right? That's what they just said. He's not going to come back with us. Like it's his choice, by the way. The implication here is it's not like just Balaam doesn't want to go, right? That's what happens. That's what he says. Then Balak sent other dignitaries, more numerous and distinguished than the first. He sends more people back, and he sends different people back, and they're higher level people. And they came to Balaam and said, thus says Balak, son of Zippor, please do not refuse to come to me. I will reward you richly, and I will do anything you ask of me. Only come and damn this people for me. So he says to him, you gotta come, and I'll give you anything you want, and I'll pay you anything you want, right? You gotta come and do this. And Balaam replied to Balak's officials, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot do anything big or little contrary to the command of my God, Adonai. And there it says right here, right? I cannot go against Adonai. And both are used, right? I cannot go against the Yud He Vav He, who is my God. So here it seems that Balaam is paying attention to God. I mean, he's not worshiping God. He's definitely thinking about God. He's thinking that he's he's going to be connected. He's got to be connected to him. So I can't do it. I can't go against God. So you two stay here overnight and let me find out what else Adonai may say to me. So maybe, I'll talk to God, see what he says. Talk to Adonai. That night, God came to Balaam and said to him, if the agents have come to invite you, you may go with them. But whatever I command you, that you shall do. All right. So I'm not sure why they have a note found Hashim, but it's just that word is sometimes used for men and sometimes it's used for agents and sometimes it's used for angels, but people of power on Hashim. All right. When he arose in the morning, Balaam saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. And this is one of the more famous scenes in the Bible, for its humor, for its outlandishness, for its miracle, for everything else involved in this story that people pay attention to, which is a talking donkey. And it's one of the things that people go, this is absolutely ridiculous. Why is this story in the Bible? It is a weird supernatural story, but let's see why. Because again, there's no question it's supposed to be humorous. It's supposed to be a story that you laugh at and laugh with and laugh at the people in it. It's definitely meant to be humorous. At least that's what everybody who I've studied with this is taught. Religious people, biblical scholars, everybody who reads this, who I trust on reading this, has said it's meant to be a humorous story. This is meant to be something where, again, it's not like, stupid humor. It's actually got an important message, but it is definitely supposed to be something we laugh at. Excuse me. So it says, when he arose in the morning, Balaam saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. God was incensed at his going. So a messenger of Adonai took a position in his way as an adversary. He was riding on a she-ass with his two servants alongside. Now, here's the weird thing. Didn't God just tell him to go? So what's going on here? Why is there, what's missing here, right? So if you look at the commentary, and again, let's see what it says here. No, that's basically saying, the other time we read about the donkey being saddled and being rode in the morning was Abraham. But that's not that. It's not as important. Let me just see if there's any other commentaries here that are. Let me just see it. Maybe one of the midrashim will point out, which is, of course, an interesting thing, which is why does God, on one hand, tell him to do it, and then now here seem to be upset about it. So there's none of these I'm going to share right now. But again, it seems as though there's something missing, or at least there's something we have to kind of like something's implied here, which is God gives him permission to go, but God doesn't tell him to go. You may go with them. And the rabbinic kind of commentary on this, or the tradition, I guess you could say in the whole, is that Balaam wants to go with them. If he really didn't want to go with them, and God's already told him, I've already blessed these people, that the fact that he's still bothering God about going is now, God is basically saying, if you want to be on that side, fine, you're going to be on that side, and you're going to suffer the consequences with that side, because I've already told you that the people are supposed to be blessed. If you want to go along with this, if you want to do it, okay, you can, but then you're going to have to do what I'm going to tell you to do, which again, is permission, but it's not encouragement, and it's definitely not a situation now where one can make the argument that because Balaam has proven himself to be base and to be on the wrong side and to want to essentially go along with this, that God's now going to use him, and he's now on the wrong side. From this point on, again, Balaam is on the wrong side. So he's going to be used and abused. So he goes off with the Moabites. Again, he's riding along. his two servants alongside. And when the ass caught sight of the messenger of Adonai, which is an angel, standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the ass swerved from the road and went into the fields. And Balaam beat the ass to turn her back onto the road. So it goes off the road and goes off into the fields. And Balaam beats the donkey and says, get back on the road. The messenger of Adonai then stationed herself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. The ass, seeing the messenger of Adonai, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he beat her again. So this time, she presses him along the wall, which is painful. The first one was just aggravating. This time, it's actually going to be painful. And so he beats her again. Once more, the messenger of Adonai moved forward and stationed himself on a spot so narrow that there was no room to swerve right or left. Can't go in any direction now. It can't go right or left. It can't go off the path. And when the ass now saw the messenger of Adonai, she lay under Balaam, and Balaam was furious and beat the ass with his stick. So that's now the third time. It's clearly supposed to be a story where, again, it's one of those stories where you're supposed to kind of laugh at it. You're supposed to kind of see this as a symbolic and kind of like, the fairy tale of, things happening in three. It's the buildup of what happened here, which is, again, now the ass has just stopped. And then it says, then Adonai opened the ass's mouth, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the ass, you made a mockery of me. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you. And the ass said to Balaam, look, I am the ass that you've been riding all along until this day. Have I ever been in the habit of doing thus to you? And he answered, no. And then Adonai uncovered Balaam's eyes, and he saw the messenger of Adonai standing in the way, his drawn sword in his hand. Thereupon he bowed right down to the ground. So finally, God lets Balaam see this angel. So it says he doesn't see him before, and to some extent, Balaam couldn't see him before. And he sees now the angel, and he gets off, gets down on the ground and he bows down. And the messenger of Adonai said to him, why have you beaten your ass these 3 times? It is I who came out as an adversary, for the errand is obnoxious to me. When the ass saw me, she shied away because of me these 3 times. If she had not shied away from me, you were the one I should have killed while sparing her. And Balaam said to the messenger of Adonai, I erred because I did not know that you were standing in my way. If you still disapprove, I will turn back. And so Balaam says, I get the message now. I understand. I didn't know. And again, this talking donkey that, again, the rabbis had a real problem. Some of them had a real problem with it, because if they were on the more rational side of things, they said, well, donkeys can't talk. And so what does happen here is, of course, God creates a once in a generation or once in a 1,000-year miracle of having a talking animal. But people have a real problem with this because, if the Bible has miracles, this is a strange miracle, because this is a miracle that affects essentially one person. It's really out of the ordinary that this kind of thing would happen, and people are left with this. Well, why does the Bible have this story? Why do we have talking donkeys? So this becomes like a big issue for people who say, is the Bible a rational book, or is it? And so, even people who are, literalists would have like problems with this section, because they're saying, this is kind of a weird story to have in the Bible. And so it's been one of the more famous stories, to some extent, because of its the supernatural, really kind of. It's a supernatural event. It's a strange event. It's a talking donkey. It's meant to be humorous. Is it supposed to be taken literally? Did Balaam imagine this? Did this all kind of happen in his head? And you have these answers that are given over time. And actually, one of the midrashic answers was that this donkey was created this way on the last day of creation, when God created all the miracles and all the things that would have like an appearance in the Bible. God created these things only for one purpose, and this was the purpose for this. So this is not just a normal kind of, like, it just doesn't happen. And again, it was created to some extent from the beginning with this, because there's this idea that even though it's irrational and supernatural and everything else, that there must have been a purpose to it, and therefore God must have created it from the beginning of time just for this purpose, just to have this one talking donkey. Now, according to the Midrash, this talking donkey doesn't go away, because once it talks, this talking donkey can't just, die and have a normal end to anything. So according to the Midrash, this talking donkey, we find a jawbone of the ass that comes up later on, the story of Samson, where Samson, kills the Philistines, and kills a whole Philistine army, the jawbone of an ass. So the rabbis like the connection between the jawbone of an ass that talked, maybe, and becomes a miraculous item later on. So that was one of the midrashic things, that the jawbone that never disappears because it's too magical, right? So, and here you have this other story of a miracle with an ass, and specifically with the part of the ass that would have talked. So they like that midrash. They like that connection with Samson and the jawbone of an ass. So again, it's Balaam learning a lesson. Balaam is meant to kind of, even though he's so powerful, he's meant to be a fool here, right? He's meant to be an idiot, and his donkey sees something that he didn't even see. So this is it's a good story of the guy that you think is smart, you think he's talking to God. The donkey actually sees things that he doesn't see. He's made to be a fool right away. So he says to God, I'll go back. But the messenger of Adonai said to Balaam, go with the men, but you must not say anything except what I tell you. So Balaam went with Balak's dignitaries. So what do you have? He ends up going. He gets permission to go again, but again, with a warning, do not, and again, it's the same note. This is, the Anashim, this is, you gotta only say what I say. Okay. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at Ir Moab, which is on the Arnon border at its farthest point. And again, this is the area that was under Moabite, had been under Moabite control at one point, or at least again at this time. This is the furthest that they can go. Balak said to Balaam, when I first sent to invite you, why didn't you come to me? Am I really unable to reward you? So Balak's first words to Balaam are not, hey, thank you for coming, sir, but why didn't you come the first time? Why did I have to send people for you later on? Why did this have to get dragged out? So it's interesting that as much as he's feels like he got what he wanted, you can see a little bit about Balak, which is that he's not even appreciative of what happens to him when he gets what he wants, which is kind of indicative of a guy who's not a good fellow. Balaam said to Balak, now that I've come to you, have I the power to speak freely? I can only utter the word that God puts into my mouth. So he tells him, look, I'm going to tell you this right away. You come at me and tell me, you're mad that I didn't come here right away. Understand, I will only say what God tells me to say. And he tells him that right away. He tells him right off the bat, I can only do what God tells me to do. I can tell you what comes out of my mouth, that's what God puts in my mouth. Right? So he tells him that right off the bat. Balaam went, and that, by the way, should be Balak's first inkling that things may not go the way he wanted it to go. Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiryat Hutzot. And Balak sacrificed ox and sheep, and then served them to Balaam and dignitaries with them. And in the morning, Balak took Balaam up to Bamot Baal. From there, he could see a portion of the people. So Balak takes Balaam up to a height, and it's called Bamot Baal, which is like the heights of the it's the altar, and it's the like the raised platform for Baal. You know, it's a or the other god. He takes him there and he says, you know, here's the people, right? He shows them some of the people. Again, it's kind of not necessarily a good place to end the chapter, but it does. Balaam said to Balak, build me 7 altars here and have 7 bulls and 7 rams ready for me. Right. And so he's doing a lot what we do, right? With sacrifices with bulls and with rams. You know, bulls are bigger, the biggest sacrifice, the rams are the next ones down. Big sacrifices. And Balak did as Balaam directed, and Balak and Balaam offered up bull and ram on each altar. So 7 altars with 7 sets of, that's a lot. And it just, the altars was a big deal. Balaam said to Balak, stay here beside your offerings while I am gone. Perhaps Adonai will grant me a manifestation, and whatever is revealed to me, I will tell you. And he went off alone. And God became manifest to Balaam, who stated, I have set up the 7 altars and offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. And Adonai put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak and speak thus. And so, according to this, God told and actually literally put in this word, or these words, this prophecy, into Balaam's mouth. God put it there, it says. So he says, so he returned to him and found him standing beside his offerings and all the Moabite dignitaries with him. And he took up his theme and he said, and again, theme is not necessarily the greatest translation here. He took up his parables, his words, his prophecies, this is what God told him to do, right? And here's what he says: from Aram has Balak called me. And Aram is again in the area of Syria, Mesopotamia, in that area by the Euphrates. Okay, starting out, this is what happens. Moab's king from the hills of the east. Come curse me, Jacob. Come tell Israel's doom. How can I damn whom God has not damned? How doom when Adonai has not doomed? So he starts off by saying, this is what happened, telling you what happened. This is how this whole thing started. And right off the bat, Balak's jaw must have dropped and said, what just happened? He just said, how can I damn what God has not damned? As I see from the mountaintops, gaze on them from the heights, there is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, number the dust cloud of Israel? May I die the death of the upright, and may my fate be like theirs. Whoa, that's the prophecy right there. Where's the, what do I get? Balak just said, I just paid for this. Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? Here I brought you to damn my enemies, instead you blessed them. That is the first blessing. Again, that was supposed to be a curse. It's a blessing. And people have looked at this first blessing, this first prophecy, if you will, about the Israelites, about the Jewish people. And they noticed at this line right here. There is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned with the nations, among the nations, or again, counted or kind of a part of the others. That's a good translation. What does your translation, by the way, have glory for verse 9? Not reckoned among, I bet you it has something different. There's a people that dwells apart. What's your translation have, Glory?
Sorry, had to
No, it's
switch.
okay.
Okay. From the rocky peaks, I see them. From the heights, I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a different, it's a little bit of a different translation with a different message. Yeah. Here's a book. Here's a book that was written a few years ago. A people that shall dwell alone. Judaism is a group evolutionary strategy with diaspora peoples. Written by Kevin McDonald. You understand? It actually goes back to 1994. So, needless to say, this idea that we're a people that dwells apart, it's a part of our, I should say a part again, it's a interesting feature of who we are. But to some extent, what makes the Jewish people different is the fact that we don't count ourselves, or we're not counted amongst those other nations. It's not really clear who's not doing the reckoning of that, whether it's others reckoning us, or we reckoning amongst them, however you want to translate the word reckon. The word yitchashav is the same root as the word hashuv, which means important or counted or recognized. I mean, there does seem to be the implication by the structure of the verb yit chashav that we don't count ourselves can be also the translation, which I think was what Glory's translation is, that we don't count ourselves among the nations. That's at least partly understood by this, which isn't that the other nations don't recognize us as one of them, but that we don't recognize ourselves as amongst everybody else. So our difference is somewhat it's our own self-identification. It's our own choice to feel that way. I don't know if anybody has thought about this before, but this could be it's not the most famous part of this scene, because there's another really, really famous section that we're going to come to in Balaam's prophecies. Really famous, so famous that we use it as a prayer all the time. But this is a really important, I think, maybe the more important part, or one of the more important parts of this blessing, is that who's making that decision that we're not a part of everybody else? Is that a decision we've made? Is it a decision other people have made? It's an interesting question. It's an interesting thing to think about, because it's still a question that we kind of have. I mean, as assimilations become more apparent and more pressing, if you will, it's become more of an issue. Who makes that decision? Do we make that decision, or do other people make that decision about us? I mean, make the argument, it used to be made about us. They didn't let us into their country clubs. They didn't let us into their hospitals. They didn't let us into their housing developments. But now that's not the case. So do we create those spaces where we're only our people are there? Some people say that we're clannish, or that we're together. Are we? Do we want to be? Is it something we're supposed to do? I don't know. I will tell you this. Think about it. I've mentioned it before, so it's not the first time. You may have heard me say this. You know what the population of the Jewish people are in America. It's less than 2%. You know what it is globally, less than 1%, 1/100th of a percent, right? We know how small the Jewish people are, right? Everybody knows that. Understand that still today, at this moment, part of our language, our English language, there is a word for everyone else who's not. The other 99.99% of the people of the world are called Gentiles. How does that happen? Look it up in a dictionary. The word for everyone who's not Jewish is Gentile. There is no other word in our language, at least, to describe the majority of the people in a way that only the one group are affiliated and that everyone else is Gentile. How does that happen? How does that even happen? So that's a fact. And again, it's the translation of this word, goyim, the nations. And so when the word in Yiddish, which has a pejorative, has definitely a negative connotation when we use the word goy, it's not meant to be. It doesn't have to be, but it does have that pejorative. It just literally means nation. But if we said the modern equivalent is Gentile, the fact is that's what it is. Everybody else in the world. It's an insane thing if you think about it. If you really think about what the ramifications are, like where does that even come from? A word for what 99% of the people are because we're the other thing? It's insane. There's not a word for everyone who's not a Christian. We just call the person a non-Christian, a non-Muslim, right? Or a person's non-white or non-whatever, non-Asian. I mean, whoever you are, you just put a non in front of it and that becomes it. But there's not a word for it. Not in English. By the way, I don't like to use the word non-Jew. I don't use that. I try not to use that word. I do sometimes, but I don't like to use that word. The fact that we actually have a word for somebody who's a non-Jew allows us to not call somebody something that they're not, right? If you identify somebody and say, you're not something, that's not really a nice thing to do. I mean, I know we don't always intend it to be negative, but I always, try to not, I try not to call someone a non. Say, you're this, you're Christian or you're whatever, but you're identified as this. But I don't say you're not. We don't go around going, you're not a man. Well, I guess we could, but you're a non-man. You're a non-man. We wouldn't do that. So we would call, I was going to say, we call that person a woman, but you can't do that anymore. You don't want to do that anymore. You don't want to call them necessarily a woman, but anyways, but that is an issue today. But just to call somebody a not something, it would not be a nice thing to do. You're not a. So we try not to. I try not to do it. I do sometimes, just out of habit. But I shouldn't, and I don't want to. I've been more cognizant of it for a long time. By the way, the other thing that's so weird about it is that we have words in Hebrew and then Yiddish that are more specific, right? Which we also really shouldn't use because they have much more of a negative connotation, which is a shiksa and a shagans. Those are words that we're not really supposed to use, but are words that we use that have become accepted or known, and even by people who aren't Jewish, by saying this is these are words for people who are not a Jewish man or not a Jewish woman. But they're not. The origins of those words are not like goyim, which just means just nations. The words shiksa and shagans are not. Those are not good words. Those are basically derogatory words in their nature. So they're not. They've been appropriated to be not necessarily as negative, but they're not good words. So try not to use those words. I try not to. People have appropriated them as funny words, including, by the way, Glory. John called his wife shiksa goddess, right? I've heard that phrase before, but which is fine, but yeah, we try not to, at least unless the people all are in on it as a term of endearment, not to say that anyways. But it is pretty weird, and again, we really do love that line at people apart, people set apart, or people that have decided that they're apart. or people that have set themselves apart. These are all ways we can translate it, but it's clearly not a bad thing. So,
Rabbi,
yeah,
are you telling me that Gloria is not Zohara, Queen of the Shiksas?
that's what as I said, you can call her that if she's in on it and she approves of it. But I said I would not normally go up to someone and go, "You're a shiksa." That's kind of outdated. But I said if you're all in on it, which you are, that's fine. I'm not going to call her. I don't feel comfortable saying that just because it's not by its origins. It's not.
So I'm using
it's not a good.
I'm using a derogatory term as a derogatory word as a term of endearment. Wow,
Endearment,
that's kind of,
yeah.
I'm
Well, yeah,
twisted.
but people, 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 you know, people, you know, look, people, people, people,
Let's see you spin this one.
I look, I didn't. The word shiksa goddess was not like you didn't. You know, a shiksa goddess was not. But look, all I can tell you is that everybody should know what it. I mean, look. I mean, it's not. It's the origin of the word of the word shaketz in Hebrew is an abomination, impure. I mean, it's not a good word. And again,
I got to come up with something else.
Yeah. So it says right here, the North American, I love this, very sociological. The North American Jewish community, the use of shiksa reflects more social complexities than merely being a mildly insult to not. It culturally evokes the complex and layered notions of sexuality, its containment of both self-righteousness and self-loathing, the embedded yearning for the guilt of assimilation. A woman can only be a shiksa if she perceived as such by Jewish people, usually Jewish men, making the term difficult to define. It's the forbidden seductress. Despite appearing in Yiddish literature for many decades, the term shiksa did not enter mainstream until the works of Philip Roth popularized it. So, yeah, look at this. The term is considered pejorative, but not a severe slur. Sometimes in 2009, it was recorded as a hate crime in Toronto. Oh, my goodness. Oh, goodness gracious. Don't say it in Canada then. Oy, oy, oy. Don't ever say the word shiksa in Canada. Now you learned it could be fined as a hate crime. Anyways, so yeah. So Balaam is, doing this thing, and Balak says, what have you done to me? I brought you to damn my enemies and said you bless them. He replied, I can only repeat faithfully what Adonai puts in my mouth. He told him that. Well, not from the beginning. Then Balaam said to him, come with me to another place from which you can see them. You only see a portion. You will see only a portion of them. You will not see all of them. And damn them for me from there. So like maybe if you see them from a different angle, you don't see all of them. Maybe you can damn some of them. Maybe you can get some of them at least for me. With that, he took him to a place called, and again, this you can see the name, Lookout Point, which is he took him to Bamot Bal. Now he takes him to this place called Sedeh Sophim on the summit of Pisgah. He built 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram. So on each altar, so now he's up to 14 altars and 14 bulls and 14 rams. And Balaam said to Balak, stay here beside your offering while I seek a manifestation yonder. And Adonai became manifest to Balaam and put a word in his mouth, saying, return to Balak and speak thus. He went to him and found him standing beside his offerings, and the Moabite dignitaries with him. And Balak asked him, what did Adonai say? And he took up his theme and said, up, Balak, attend, give ear to me, son of Tzipor. God is not human to be capricious or mortal to have a change of heart. Would God speak and not act, promise and not fulfill? My message was to bless. When God blesses, I cannot reverse it. No harm is in sight for Jacob, no woe in view for Israel. Their God, Adonai, is with them, and their kings acclaim in their midst. God who freed them from Egypt is for him like the horns of the wild ox. Lo, there is no augury in Jacob, no divining in Israel. Jacob is told at once, yea, Israel, what God has planned. Lo, a people that rises like a lioness, leaps like a lion, rests not till it is feasted on prey, and shrunk the blood of the slain. Whoa, 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 that's even crazier, because now he's basically telling them, oh yeah, I already told you, these people are blessed. God's saying they're blessed. And what's even better is they don't do this stuff. They don't do witchcraft and divining. Now, of course, later on they do, and they're not going to get in trouble for it. But they don't do that, and they don't need to, because God talks to them directly. There is no need for this kind of witchcraft, this kind of sorcery. You don't have to try to get God to do stuff, because God's already on their side, and God tells them exactly what's gonna happen. There's no need for seers and for tea leaves and those kind of things. They know exactly what's happening because God's with them. And they're compared to a lion, and they are going to attack you. And there are two words here, which is why they translate one as lioness and one as a lion. But I'm not really sure. They just wanted to show you those two different words here. Hebrew has lots of different words for lion. We don't really have, well, we really don't have different words for lion in English. I'm thinking about it. We really don't, which is why we use the words like lion. We translate both and use lion and lioness. But we in Hebrew have a lavi and we have an ari. Now lavi and ari, and we actually have another couple of words for lions. We have the word kfir, and we have a lion, which is usually a lion cub. And we have another word named which is gur, which is also a lion or some kind of animal, some kind of cougar or some kind of mountain lion. So we actually have, well, I guess we do have mountain lions, but the word lion in Hebrew there's different forms of it. So are they kind of like slightly different kinds of lions? Are they different size lions? Again, are they like lions in different stages of life? Little lion, a larger lion, a male or female lion. Interestingly, these words all come into modern Hebrew. When Israel invented when they kind of upgraded one of the original fighter planes, they called it a Lavi fighter. The word Ari, lion, is the name for Arik Sharon. That was his name, but he was named after the lion. And again, Aris are important for battle to this day. David Ben Gurion called himself Ben Gurion, changed his name from David Green to Gurion, which is a lion. So the idea of lions are very important for us even today as symbols of toughness, right? Fear was also one of the planes that Israel, I think the F-15 or F-16, the Israeli modification was called a kafir. So we use them for battle even to this day. So, the Lavi, I don't think ever actually, that was actually a plane that Israel was going to go into construction and go into development on its own. And then it kind of were talked out of it by the Americans said, no, you'll continue to buy planes from us and we'll give you whatever you want. So the Lavi, I don't think ever actually got made. Anyways, so now what does Balak say? Balak says to Balaam, okay, don't curse them and don't bless them either, right? Don't do that. Don't do anything. Just keep your mouth shut. In reply, Balaam said to Balak, I told you, whatever Adonai says, that I must do. And then Balak said to Balaam, come now, I'll take you to another place. Perhaps God will deem it right that you damn them for me there. Wow. So Balak took Balaam to this peak of Peor, which overlooks the wasteland. Okay. And Balaam said to Balak, build me 7 altars. And I had 7 bulls and 7 rams ready for me. And now we're up to 21. And Balak did as Balaam said, and he offered up a bull and a ram on the altar. And so now you got a third vantage point. Now Balaam, seeing that it pleased Adonai to bless Israel, did not, as on previous occasions, go in search of omens, but turned his face towards the wilderness, which is interesting because now it says that Balaam is not doing what he normally did, which is try to do the magic that he would do in order to get God to speak to him. So he now tries something different because it seems like he wants to try to get a different message too. As Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. And taking up his theme, he said, word of Balaam, son of Beor, word of man whose eye is true, word of one who hears God's speech, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate but with eyes unveiled. Right? So all this introduction is you're going to be good in your prophecy, right? You're going to be powerful in your prophecy. But now here it gets good, really good. It gets so good that we use it all the time. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. And that's where ma tovu comes from. It comes from the prophecies of Balaam. It comes from the blessings which were supposed to be curses, but instead become not just a blessing for one moment in time, from one vantage point, from the third vantage point, as you saw, but now the blessing becomes a blessing for all time, which is this beautiful word, these beautiful words that were first spoken by a Gentile, first spoken by a Gentile wizard, a sorcerer, magician, a wizard, whatever you want to say. This is a dude who's employing normally magic, but not this time. And notice how when God speaks to him now, the message that comes through is the message that we use all the time, a message that made it into our liturgy. And what's interesting about it is, again, this guy is the earliest dude that we ever can prove existed outside of the Bible. Now, we only knew that since 1967. The tradition of using ma tovu in our prayers goes back thousands of years. And what's so interesting about it is it's a prayer which takes this first line and then other lines from the Bible, which talk about not just how beautiful our tents are, but our sanctuaries, right? Our temples, not temples, but our temple. And so the reason that it was put in the liturgy of our services is because it reminded us that our synagogues, our sanctuaries are beautiful. Even when they weren't fancy, they were beautiful. But it's not just our synagogues, temples, our worship spaces, but it is our dwellings. And so the interesting thing about this is that this line only has the parts of our tents and our sanctuaries. Here it's translated as tents and dwellings, but the Mishkan was the tabernacle. So if you think about it, when we look at we're gonna finish up with this part right now, because we really should finish this prophecy and then I'll go back and show you this. Like palm groves that stretch out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by Adonai, like cedars beside the water. Their boughs drip with moisture, their roots have abundant water. Their ruler shall rise above Agag, their sovereignty shall be exalted. God who freed them from Egypt is for them like the horns of a wild ox. They shall devour enemy nations, crush their bones, and smash their arrows. They crouch, and there it is again. They crouch, they lie down like a lion, like a lioness. Who dares rouse them? Blessed are those who bless you. Cursed are those that curse you. We have that idea right from the beginning of our existence from Abraham. Abraham says, when God says, you lech lecha, that you will be a blessing, and that people will bless you will be blessed. People that curse you will be cursed. And it says, enraged at Balaam, Balak struck his hands together and said, I called you, Balak, and said to Balaam to damn my enemies. Instead, you have blessed them these 3 times. Back with you at once to your own place. I was going to reward you richly, but Adonai has denied your reward. Now, I'm not going to tell you yet what happens. You can read on, but I'm going to actually show you one thing real importantly right now. And it's back to this part, the how Farrier dwells, the Matovu part, the part that's become so famous for us. And this is what I want you to see today. This is it's one of my favorite parts of the book of Numbers, because, it teaches us that the people who were going to curse us end up not being able to even curse us, and instead end up turning what they thought would be a curse into a blessing, and such an important blessing that we use it to this day. So, what I want to show you is the full text of the prayer. So let me just show you the full Matovu. 1 second. So, sometimes we just do one line. Sometimes we just do Matovu and we sing it as a round. Sometimes we actually sing the whole thing. So let me just bring up. Let me just bring up the whole. You'll see what. Show you the whole thing. So this is the full text of it. Matovu Alecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, your dwellings, O Israel? And it is through, the next line is Ani Barov Chasecha, Avo Beitecha. It is through your bounded love that I've entered your home, the Beitecha. And then it says, I will bow Ishtacha ve'elchacha kodshecha v'yiretecha. I will bow in awe in the direction of your holy temple. So you can see the words that are used in the Matovu prayer, right? Which are the tents, the dwelling places, the bait, the home, and the temple. Now, what's interesting about those, some people pointed out, is that if you look at the structure of this, the Mishkan and the Ohel are both tents. They're both temporary dwelling places. They're places that we lived in the desert. We lived in tents. We lived in the tents, and God lived in the Mishkan. So when we were in tents, God was in a tent. When we had bait, when we had a home, which we had in the land of Israel, then God had the Chechal. And a Chechal is the word for palace. It's also a word for a temple, the house of God. So God had a permanent house when we had a permanent house, and that reflected it. What also tells us again is that, we have a house and God has a house. We have a synagogue and we have our house. And they kind of reflect each other. And there is this sense that, in the world that we live in, our houses are going to kind of be, there'll be a mirror of them to some extent. Our houses can be also like synagogues, and the temple can also feel like home to us. It should feel like home. There should be this relationship between our houses and our places of worship. And a lot of people have said that our building looks like a house. It was not built as a house. It was built as a Jehovah's Witness Assembly Hall. It was never a house. It was never a home. You know how you can know that? There's no kitchen, and there's never been a home that's been built in the last 50 years without a kitchen. So there never was a kitchen. That place was built by the Jehovah's Witnesses to be a place of worship. Now, again, it's in a development, but the development actually came after the assembly hall was built. So but it does look like a house, and ours actually does. A lot of synagogues don't, but it is interesting that our synagogue happens to be like that. But what I love about this phrase, and again, it's maybe one of the least appreciated parts of this, and I don't know if I invented this, but I will definitely tell you this. Look at this. It says, how fair your tents are, Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, with a big exclamation at the end of it. Well, not big, but to me it's big, but it's not really an exclamation. As a matter of fact, the word ma in Hebrew, does anyone know what the word ma in Hebrew means? Well, it means how.
Yeah.
Right? How is not oftentimes not the way you begin could be a rhetorical question, but it's very rarely finished with an exclamation. What's it usually finished with? Question mark. So I always like to remind people, how. Are they? Are they? Are your tents, are your homes
That's
fair?
the question.
Are they fair? Are they good? Right? Are your dwelling places, right? Is your synagogue, is your Mishkan, is it also good? Is it tov? Is it good? And so I think this is a question, right? This is as much a question for us as it is a hope, as a statement, as a blessing. But I think it's a rhetorical question. And I think it's something where we really have to think about what that means, and whether we're doing our job to make our homes places that are reflective of that. Whether our home is a place where God's Spirit exists, and whether our sanctuaries are a place where God's presence exists. Are we letting God into the sanctuary? Is God present with us in that space? And I think what's so powerful about this is that almost every year, or roughly around this time of year, and I've made this a point before, so people might have heard this before, but I want you to know this. This year we're reading. This year we read Balak, July 1st, but oftentimes we read it the next week, or around that time of July 4th. And what I think is so cool about this song, and of course this original blessing or prophecy or question, is that we oftentimes read this at the same time of year that we think about our country. And what's so cool about our country is that we have a national anthem that everybody knows, right? The Star Spangled Banner. And think about the last line of the Star Spangled Banner. Think about the last line. The last line of the Star Spangled Banner. Somebody give me the last line of the Star Spangled Banner. Hello? Anybody? What's the last line of our national anthem? Oh, say does
That
that
Star
Star
That's
Spangled
the
Banner
Banner.
still
Wave
Yeah.
over the light of
wave o'er the land of the free, the home of the brave?
You're the home of the brave.
It's much easier when you sing it, right? So think about that. It actually ends with a question too. Oh, say, does that Star Spangled? Because when Francis Scott Key wrote that, he wasn't sure.
uh-huh.
He was a captive. The British had captured him during the War of 1812, and he wanted to make sure that his country was still standing. So he actually wrote that poem. He wrote those words when he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure. He was hoping, but he wasn't sure. And so it's really written as a question. Now, we don't say it as a question, but it actually, if you think about it, is a question. And so the challenge of the national anthem, the challenge of Ma Tovu is the same. Are we doing our part to do this? Because it's not a foregone conclusion. It's a hope, but it's not a conclusion. Both of them are questions. So you actually have to think about it. Are we doing our part to make sure that freedom is still there? Is our country still standing? Because it's not a guarantee. And so I love the fact that both of those right around the same time ask us a rhetorical question, or it's not a rhetorical question, at least a probing question, which is, are we doing our part to make sure that our homes are beautiful or good? And are we making sure that our country is a place for freedom? So those are not easy things to do, and they can't take them for granted. And so I think that asking that question of ourselves, and asking that question of our leaders, and asking that question of our neighbors is a fair question to ask. And there's a huge responsibility to do it. And I think that the fact that we read these at the same time, the first time that kind of dawned on me that this was an interesting
Question.
holy coincidence was
Yeah.
that first year that I looked at it and said, you know what? That's our question too. We have a question. Are we doing our part? And don't assume that it's going to be that way. So, folks, with that, we're going to finish up. We will be having Shavuot tomorrow to celebrate the receiving of the Torah. We're going to be doing something together with Congregation Beth Shalom. It will be at their place at 6 p.m. We're going to have some Shavuot foods. We're going to have some cakes and some stuff like that, some ice cream, some Shavuot style foods. I'll be doing a little study together for Shavuot, a little joint Torah study. Not Torah study, actually. We're doing some other stuff, but it should be interesting. And we'll see you. If you're with us, and only for Wednesdays, we'll be online again next Wednesday. So we won't be in person on Wednesday. We'll be online, and I will be en route to San Diego that day. So, but I'll be somewhere. I'll be in a place where we can do this again. I'll be in the California time zone, one way or the other. So I look forward to seeing everybody. And it says right now that my flight is leaving at 12:08, which is good. I got a chance not to be rushed, because it could have been any time in the last 2 hours I could have left. So, or no, sorry. In the next hour and 10 minutes to whatever, a half hour, 40 minutes ago. So who knows? I just kept my thing on. You can't see it, but anyways, trust me when I tell you that it's been a long day, but it's good to see everybody. I'm glad we got this. And this teaching that everybody in the airport today got, I hope they appreciated that. They all got some Torah study here today. And the Houston Hobby Airport.
Oh, look, you're at the airport. Look at that.
Oh no,
Yeah.
this is Hobby Airport at
wow.
11 o'clock at night. So, but again, I got to tell you something. I was so blown away by the music that we created today. I can't wait for y'all to see it, and I can say that for y'all to see it because I'm in Texas. But you're gonna love what Joe and Abby and Saul did, and they're just such great people. And we had Saul who lives up in the Bay Area. We had Abby from Florida, and we had Joe here in Texas in his backyard. And we did it at a honky tonk. Well, it wasn't really honky. It was more of a craft. It was more of a craft brewery and distillery. It was much nicer. It was super nice, but it was not the chicken wire, place that we thought we'd do, like out of Blues Brothers. But it was still really the people were very nice there, and I'm really excited for you to see it. So everybody take care, Hag Sameach, and again, hopefully everyone stays strong during this time of year. So take care, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Good night.